Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today I'm going to show you how to create some interesting backgrounds. These are backgrounds that I've created using the Brushos product, and I'll just show you what they look like. Brushos is a pigment ink in powder form, and you get them in different colours. This is Brushos from Colourcraft. I've got here the lime green and the turquoise. I've used these two little pots to create these different backgrounds, which you can see are really vibrant, really interesting in colour. I'll show you how the different techniques. I've used a different technique to create this one, which you can see has got lighter swirls of colour, but all of the paper is pretty much coloured. This one is a different technique where you end up with more blobs and you do get areas of the paper where you can see the background. I'll also show you how to mop up so that you can create, in effect, lighter versions using the same colour palette that coordinate in, and obviously could be used for the same project. And you can similarly use a darker palette and thicker colour to create more darker and more vibrant panels. So if you're interested in creating stuff like this to use as backgrounds and put a focal point in front, carry on watching. Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today I'm going to show you a quick background effect. I'm going to be using this product, which is called Brushos. These are little pigment ink powders that you sprinkle, or you can dilute them with water and put them into little sprayers, and they make great backgrounds. I've got two colours here. I've got a lime green and a turquoise. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of using them. So first of all, I've got a piece of watercolour cardstock. This is quite a thick cardstock, and it needs to be quite a thick cardstock because what we're going to do is use a lot of water. So what I've also got is my distress sprayer. So I'm going to first of all give this a spray. Actually, I'm just going to move my camera back a little bit so you can see a little bit more. There we go. So I've got my cardstock, and in the top of these little pots I've actually poked a little hole through. You can see there's a little hole in the middle there. Before you use them, not a bad idea just to go in the hole and just make sure it's not blocked up, because they can get blocked up sometimes. There we go. So I'm going to, and some people actually do leave like a map pin in them. So first time round, I'm going to show you in effect where you spray the water first and then add the powders. So I'm going to lay down some water onto this cardstock. Look, you can see I've got one little stray powder there already. And then with the cardstock very wet, I'm going to just tip the powders onto it. And what you'll see, as the powders fall, they hit the water and you get this instant colour effect, which is quite interesting. That kind of develops over time. You can see the water here is pooling, but what happens is that colour, as you can see here, it kind of develops as the water flows and as the ink finds the liquid. We're going to add our second colour. So this is the lime green. And you can see when they go on, they kind of look a different colour. This looks a bit orangey, but you'll see as it kind of spreads out, it's going to change colour. Now what you can do to get this going, although we started off with water, and obviously we've got quite a lot of water now on our glass mat, is you can give it another spritz. That will activate any of the powders that haven't yet been activated. What I like to do also is take a heat gun and blast it. If you do this, you can find that you can move stuff around. If you look at what's happening, as I'm drying it, I'm kind of pushing things around. So this is an interesting effect. I'm just going to actually grab a piece of kitchen towel because I've got quite a lot of water there. Just put that underneath just to mop up some of that water. There we go. But what you can do if you take your heat gun is dry this out so that it kind of uncurls. But you can get some really interesting effects with this. As you see, you can get like a swirl, almost like a flower. This is quite a good background for a card. Obviously, you wouldn't want too many sort of big bold lines if you're using it as a background. But what you can do as well is use these Brushos to make a multicoloured piece that you then cut using a die. It's good for things like flower heads or sort of geometric shapes, things like that. Because it's got quite a wild and kind of natural look to it, it's quite good on things from the natural world, so works quite well in that sort of scenario. There we go. So there's our first go. Now we can add more. So if we go in again, we can again wet the paper or the card and then add more. And you'll see same thing happens again, and you can build up the color. If you want more of a certain color in a certain place, just add it where you feel the need. Apologies, my dog is going crazy in the background, I don't know why. Right, and then maybe a bit more just to activate that. And you can see if you add a lot of water when it's curved, obviously the water will run off to the side of the paper. This is the only problem doing this effect, is controlling the amount of water you get. You can blot it with a kitchen towel and grab that water off the sides. But it all kind of adds to the randomness of the overall look, if you ask me. So I'm going to push some water that way, because I've got a little bit there where the powders didn't activate. But you can create almost like a watercolor effect. It's, you know, the possibilities are endless. So this is one way to do it, where you wet the paper first. And this does kind of change the way it works, because you get bigger swathes of colour that aren't so distinct with particularly dark or intense bits of the pigment. So this is one way of doing it, and I'll show you a different way in a sec. So this gives you, as you can see, a paler, more kind of softer effect, really. So I thought I'd start off and show you that one first. So this is not too bright a background. This is quite good for putting something on top of. So a central focal point. This is quite good for a kind of shabby chic card where you would add other layers, or you could tear this and then use this with other layers added to it, or build it up. So there we go, there's our first piece. I'm just going to dry the back, which will just help that flatten out. There we go, so there's our first one. And just let me just hold that up so you can see it in real detail. Quite an interesting, almost like a space effect. You could kind of create almost like a space type background. Right, I'm now going to take another piece of paper, and this time round I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to put the powders on first and then do the spraying. So this is a different, it kind of achieves a different look. I think I'd probably say it's a bolder, more vivid effect with more colour in a smaller space. So same effect, just get your powders. It doesn't look like anything's coming out when you do this, which is really strange, but it probably is coming out and you just can't see it. So give that a shake all over. It's a little bit like putting salt on your Christmas dinner. You can see some of the colour there. And then go in with the other colour. Some of them are more obvious than others. You can see that one does show up a little bit more. There we go. We've got some good coverage. I might just put a little bit more of the blue on. And then this time round, I'm not going to spray quite as close. I'm just going to do that from a little bit further away. But with the same intention, just to get all the page wet. You can see that again is kind of building, isn't it? The colours find the water and it kind of drags the colour from place to place. The more water you add, the more it kind of stretches. So, and you can just leave it to do its thing, really. You'll find you get almost like this nebular effect. But you see what I mean about the colour staying pretty much where it is. I'm quite interested in that background, actually. That's quite a nice effect. Again, use your kitchen towel and just dab if you think the water's becoming kind of too much in certain places. If you want to kind of grab some of that, just use literally a tiny little end of the kitchen towel. Just soak that up. but otherwise you can go straight in with your heat tool. Do it from quite a distance, because then it will dry without pushing the ink too far around, and you still get all those lovely kind of effects with the different layers of colour. As I said, you do need quite a decent thickness of paper, because obviously we're getting it quite wet. I've actually added probably a little bit more water there than I would normally if I was doing it this way around. So it's ended up being kind of almost a bit of a hybrid of the first one I did. There we go, I'll just turn that over and dry the back just to get it dry, and also to flatten the paper out a little bit. These Brushos you can get on Amazon. They sell a set where you get a whole load of different colours. There are quite a lot of earthy colours, quite a lot of greens, browns, blues, but there's yellows, reds, there's a whole mixture of colours. You can buy them in a set. There we go. So let's try that one bit. There we go. So it's a little bit like alcohol inks. You kind of get that same effect where you get almost like little pools of colour. So let's have a look at those two together. So this is the first one that I did where we wet the paper, and you can see the difference in the effect, which I kind of described but probably badly. What you can see on this, you end up, because you started off with it wet, it pulls the colour, you end up getting rivers of colour almost, more merged, more blended. On the one where you don't do that at the start, you end up with more spots of colour. You can see we've got more of the background paper here, we've got less of it here because it wasn't wet, it didn't encourage stuff to go all over. This one you can see has got more dots, you get this kind of almost like a cauliflower effect. Again, both could be used as backgrounds for some kind of a foreground stamp. I've got something on my desk here, something like this. This is a, well, I think it's an All and Create stamp actually, but it was just a cheap one I bought from China. I'm not sure if it was Temu or AliExpress or somebody, but something like that in front, you know, on either of those would work. Something like this woodware stamp that a friend gave me, that could work really well on here, stamped in black, partially coloured in maybe, I don't know. Or you could do something just like a nice sentiment in the middle of the card. But there are lots of options with this. If you do this and you want to add more, you can, that's the thing. So if you look at my mat, I've actually got quite a lot of pigment on there. If I do that, it will reactivate it. You can then go in almost like Distress Inks and lift that up and add it in. So you can see I'm picking up and adding. If you don't like how it looks, you can take things off again with the kitchen towel, or the other direct route is just add more of the powder on and then spray it again. Because this is really, really heavy watercolor cardstock, it'll take multiple sprayings. It will get to a point where it starts to curve and it won't want to go back, but if you, as long as you use double-sided tape, etc., when you stick it down, you know, you should be able to do what you need to. There we go. So I've just added another layer of the blue. You can see it's all activating, curling up slightly. And I just love this effect you get when all the water kind of pools together. It's almost like, well, I don't know, like it's migrating. It's like a herd of wildebeest across the Serengeti. I feel like David Attenborough. There we go. Right, let's try that again. And look how ideally that's kind of cleared the area in the middle for a focal point. It's almost like fate. To dry it, don't dry it too close because, as I said, it'll push the ink around. Okay, you can see the card is kind of moving back. And that's a really good tip. Just heating the card up will encourage it to kind of bend back. So I could blot that green blob. If I don't blot that green blob, it will end up drying as a kind of almost like an alcohol ink pool. There we go, you see what I mean. So just going to finish drying that and then give it a dry on the back. And you can keep adding, keep adding, keep adding. You could build up the layers until you're kind of happy with what you've got. Another thing that looks good on top of this is stenciling. If you stencil with some white texture paste on top of this with a vibrant background, it really shows up. So I've got a few little bits here that I'm just thinking I could use to add into this area where I'm a little bit short of colour. See, I've now given that a little bit of colour in there. If you want to get specific bits, you can just go in with those specific bits. Like this. The more water you add, the more it'll pull the colour out. And the other thing I've noticed as well, if you spray slowly, you get bigger drops of water because it doesn't mist as much. That's another way of getting bigger drops. Apologies for all the heat noise during this one, but obviously I've got to heat quite a lot to dry this off each time. But that's now got us a little bit of blue in that central area where it's a little bit devoid. Just going to lift some of that off actually. Yeah. But I think that now looks pretty good. And these are great backgrounds. Sometimes when I'm just feeling in the mood to get messy, I'll just get my glass mat out, either these or some distress oxides, and just create some backgrounds. And it just gives you some stuff that if you then want to create a card and you want an interesting background, you've got something already done to play with. What I'll typically do when I've made something like this is I fold them inside a piece of scrap A4 and I put them under a big pile of books. I've got a unit next to me where I pop these. 9 times out of 10 I put them under that and then I forget about them, and I go back in a few months time to put something else there, discover them, and then think, oh, this is nice, I can have a play with this now. And by then they are well dried and they are well flat. Okay, so that's where we've ended up. So you see I know we worked on this one a little bit more, but you see the difference between the two. Smooth, faded out, blended, more dotty, more pops of colour, two different backgrounds. I've got some others I made earlier here, so you can see I made a more intense one with more of the blue than the green. And this was quite interesting because it ended up with areas where there were real overlaps of the colour, and I left it like that. So I'll use these probably in a shabby sheet card. I'll probably tear them up and stick them down. Might even use them on these cards because obviously the colours all start to tie in. And then the last thing to say on this is you've also still got a load of colour here on your mat. If you spray this, that would give you a very faint. Just taking another bit of scrap paper here, the same watercolour. If you lay that down, you will get a very faint version of those same colours. Obviously, there's a lot of water on there now, so it's going to thin it out, but you could create almost like a pale background version of that same palette of colours that you were using. If you dry it, again, when you start to dry it, you'll start to then see the layers of the different colour, and you'll get also edges. Everywhere you end up with a blob, that's where you tend to get a little island in the colour. As I said, if you don't want to end up with that, just lift it off with a piece of kitchen towel. There you go, so that's dried that, but you can see there are still some bits of colour on here. I can go in and grab them, go in and grab that. And don't put the whole thing down every time. If you put just a bit of it down and touch it, you're going to get colour in that area. See? Try it again. See? And even though the colours are way more subtle now, you do start to build up a matching piece in the similar palette that gives you choices when you then go to use it in your project. You've got a thin section of colour that you can use against dark colours for contrast. It gives you just options basically. So I'm just going in, looking at where I've still got any colour on my glass mat. Waste not, want not. You can scoop like this as well. You can kind of pull down. If you do that, you tend to get an edge. It's quite good if you want to use a whole panel. You want to get like edge colour. But I mean, just play with it. I'd say it's quite an interesting technique. And these Brushos are quite effective because they're not expensive for these little pots. As I've said, if you buy some cheap little spray brushes from Temu or AliExpress or somewhere, just a little, literally the end of a teaspoon of this colour in a sprayer like this, and you've got spray medium that you can use, much like distress inks, etc. I've done that, I've used it, they're very good. So I'm just going to finish drying this last one. I think that looks really nice. That one is quite subtle. And then I'm just going to give my mat a spray. I think we've not really wasted that much, which is good. And then I'll just lay them all out so you can see. So here is our first one, which is the one we did with the water on the bottom before we added the product. Here is our second one where we added our product and then spritzed and did that in multiple layers. Here is our third one, which you can see is the same color palette, but just very different in its look because it's very, very pale. And they are the couple that I had done playing with earlier. There we go. So there's today's video. Very simple, just to create backgrounds using a little bit of color and maybe a product that you've not seen before, which are Brushos by Colourcraft, which, as I said, you can find on Amazon. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, maybe give me a like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. There's lots on there, techniques and card making, and I'll catch you next time.